Hello HISD students, my name is Mr. Vivas and I'm going to be your middle school math teacher. Today we are going to learn about sets and subsets of real numbers. To begin, I want to do a quick introduction about myself. I am a teacher and I've been working at Houston Independent School District for the last 4 years. All my career has been at Farmville Middle School. One of my hobbies is to play soccer, and that's why I'm so proud to also be the soccer coach of the school. Of course, my overall passion is math, and that's why I pursue a math certification to be a teacher. My goal is for these lessons to give you a simple explanation of math concepts, so you can grow interest on this amazing subject. So, let's begin our lesson for today. To start, we are going to set specific objectives for each of the middle school grades that we have for today's lesson. For 6th graders, and you can repeat this after me, we will classify whole numbers, integers, and rational numbers using a Venn diagram to describe the relationship between the sets of numbers. For our 7th graders, and you can repeat this after me, we will extend previous knowledge of sets and subsets using a Venn diagram to describe the relationship between sets of rational numbers. For our 8th graders, we will extend previous knowledge of sets and subsets using a Venn diagram to describe the relationship between sets of real numbers. Finally, the language objective for all of us is we will write using sentence frames and selected vocabulary about the relationship between sets of real numbers. The only materials that you will need today is a paper or a notebook or something to write on, and you can use a pencil, pen, or marker or something to write with. I will recommend you guys using pencils so you can erase in case you make mistakes. We are going to start with a simple exercise, and the question is, where are you from? You can think about the city that you live. In our example, we're going to say that you live in Houston. So that means that you are part of a group of people that live in the city of Houston. But if you think about it, you are also part of a bigger group of people that live inside of the state of Texas. So this is an example of how one group fits inside of another group. If you think about it further, you are also part of the people that live inside of the United States of America. And this right here is a Venn diagram or a visual representation or of how one set is included in a bigger set. And this is very important for us to understand the vocabulary that we are going to learn for the relationship of sets and subsets of real numbers. Our first word is sets. And sets is just a group of items. In our example, one set is Houston because it groups the people that live inside the city of Houston. The next word is subsets. And this is when one set or one group of items fit entirely inside of another group. In our example, Houston is a subset of Texas. Furthermore, Houston and Texas are subsets of the United States of America. In this section, I'm gonna need you to start working on your notes, because now we're gonna introduce all the sets that are inside of the real numbers. So I want you to start with a circle, and I want you to put there natural numbers. This is gonna be the first set that we are going to talk about. In natural numbers, you can think about all the numbers that you use for counting. It can be the number 1, the number 2, the number 10, number 20, number 150, and they are all in its positive form. It does not include the number 0. Now, make sure that you use these few seconds to do the circle, put the name, and put some examples inside of that circle. Now, draw a bigger circle around the natural numbers. And these are called whole numbers, because the whole numbers are all the natural numbers plus the number 0. So now we can say that some examples are the number 0, the number 10, number 20, number 100. Make sure that you have these couple of seconds so you can put some examples inside of your Venn diagram. Now you're gonna draw an even bigger circle, and this is gonna be called the integers. And the integers contain all the whole numbers and natural numbers, but now we are also adding the negative form. That means that we have the number 0, number 10, number 5, number 20, but also we have -5, -2, and -1. Make sure that you take this couple of seconds to write the name and some examples inside your Venn diagram. Now you're gonna draw an even bigger circle, and this set is going to be called rational numbers. And rational numbers contain all integers, plus it adds decimal numbers. It could be 0.2, 0.3, it could be 3/4, or 1/2. All the numbers in the rational numbers can be expressed as a fraction. The next group is irrational numbers. And notice that irrational numbers are not inside of rational numbers. That's because they are completely different. Because irrational numbers cannot be expressed as a fraction of two integers. One example is pi. And pi is just a number that does not have a termination on its decimals. The last vocabulary word is our real numbers, and this is just the big family that includes all the rational numbers and all the irrational numbers. With this, we finish our vocabulary introduction. Okay, now is gonna be our turn to apply the concepts that we learned during the previous section in order for us to start classifying the numbers that we are gonna see appearing on the screen. Now remember, you got a Venn diagram that you should have on your notes in order for those notes to help you get the classification of these numbers. I'm going to do the first number with you, and then I'm gonna let you guys start working on your own for a couple of seconds for you to check your own understanding. So let's start our exercise. Our first number is number 25. And let's think about the number 25. Well, number 25 is not a decimal number, is not a negative number, and you can use the number 25 to count. So that's why we call it a counting number. And we know that the counting numbers are just called natural numbers. So that means that the number 25 is part of the natural numbers. But then we have to think about what other groups does the number 25 also lands on. So we can see on the diagram that the natural numbers are a subset of whole numbers. So that means that the number 25 is also a whole number. So now you can see the pattern that is going to start appearing here. Of course, you see that the whole numbers are a subset of integers. And that means that the number 25, well, you guessed it right, is part of the integers. And I can further see that the integers are also a subset of rational numbers. So that means, yes, you got it, that the 25 is also part of the rational numbers. And I can see that the rational numbers are not part of the irrational numbers, but they are part of the bigger rectangle that is called the real numbers. So the next check will be only on the real numbers. Very good. So now I am going to give you guys 20 seconds for you to start classifying the following numbers that are going to appear on our screen. Let's see how you do. Our first number is -2. 20 seconds starts right now. Okay, let's see how you guys did. Remember that if it's a negative number, then it's not going to be part on the natural numbers nor on whole numbers. Actually, the first set of numbers that are negative is going to be, you got it, the integers. Very good. And I know that the integers are a subset of rational numbers. Very good. And I know that the rational numbers are part of the bigger rectangle that is called the real numbers. Good. Good so far. Let's see how you do on the next one. Our next number is 2/3. You guys are gonna have again 20 seconds for you guys to classify this number correctly. Let's start. Very good. So 2/3, we have to remember that if it's a fraction, we need to simplify this fraction, or if it's already simplified, we have to convert it to its decimal form to make sure that we know on which family it lands. So if we do 2/3 or 2 divided by 3, it'll give us a number that is 0.66 going to infinity. So that means if it's a decimal number, that is a rational number. And of course, if it's a rational number, that means that is also a real number. Very good. Let's try our next number, which is the number pi. I'm gonna give you again, guys, 20 seconds for you to classify pi correctly. Okay, so I know this number is a little bit tricky, but if you remember, pi is a number that does not have a termination. That means that this number is a decimal that goes to infinity. We don't know how many numbers are inside of this decimal. So if we have what we call a non-terminating decimal, that means that this number is an irrational number. And of course, if we see our Venn diagram, the irrational number is only inside of the big rectangle that is the real numbers. So pi is going to be only part of the irrational numbers and the real numbers. Now let's go ahead and look at the last number that we have for you guys to check your own understanding. And this is the number 0. You guys again are gonna have 20 seconds to correctly classify the number 0. Okay, so our number 0, if we remember correctly from our review section, is not part of the natural numbers. That means that it's not a counting number, but it starts on the whole number set. So that means that the number 0 is part of the whole numbers. And of course, if it's part of the whole numbers, it's a subset of the integers. So that means that it's also part of the integers. And we can further say that is part of the rational numbers. Very good. And if it's a rational number, it's also a real number. So we just finished our section with 5 examples on how you guys can classify real numbers in middle school. And now we're gonna go to our next section to review further our knowledge. Okay, so now numbers are going to start to show up on the screen, and we are going to classify them and make sure that we put them in the correct set on our Venn diagram on our left. Then we're going to use a sentence stem in order for us to give a complete answer for the question. And the question is, what is the classification of the following numbers? Let's start. Our first number is 8.5. And we have to think of this number as a number that has a decimal. Since it has a decimal, that means that it's part of the rational numbers. Very good. So that means that it's part of the rational numbers and also part of the real numbers. Very good. So now we can use our sentence stem and we can write the number 8.5 is part of the rational numbers and the real numbers. Now our next number is going to be a little tricky, so make sure that you are paying attention and that you put all the notes that you need in order to remember this. So our number is 6/3. This number is in a form of a fraction, but we said at the beginning that if we have a fraction, we have to simplify it and make it into its decimal form so we can know exactly what set of the real numbers is contained in. So let's say 6/3 simplify is going to be equal to 2, to the number 2. What does that mean? That means that the number 2 is actually a natural number. And if it's a natural number, it's also a subset of, yes, you got it, the whole numbers. And if it's a whole number, it's also an integer. And if it's an integer, it's also a rational number. And if it's a rational number, that means that it's also a real number. So now our sentence stem is going to look like this. The number 6/3 is part of the naturals, wholes, integers, rationals, and the real numbers. So every time that you have a fraction, make sure that you simplify it in order to know on which set is contained in. Our next number is a square root of 7. And in order for us to know on which classification is contained, we can use a calculator. If we use a calculator, we'll know that a square root of 7 is actually a non-terminating decimal. That means that the decimals are going to continue until infinity. What does that mean? Well, according to our review vocabulary, that means that a square root of 7 will be part of irrational numbers. And if it's part of the irrational numbers, that means that it's also part of the real numbers. So now we can use our sentence stem to say that the number square root of 7 is part of the irrationals and the real numbers. Now that we've gone through the sections for real numbers, the first one, the review section, where we looked at the vocabulary needed for the unit, and then the learning section, where we learn how to classify the real numbers and how does the sets look in a Venn diagram. Now it's going to be our turn to use that knowledge in order to classify real numbers. The question is, given the following numbers, correctly group them and use the sentence stem to answer. The numbers that you have to classify are the following. And you can take a picture. So if you don't have time during this lesson, you can do it by yourself. The numbers are the following: 3.4, -7, 98, a square root of 5, and the fraction 4/5. The sentence stem that you are going to use is the following: the number blank is part of the blank. You have to name all the sets that each number is contained in. I am going to give you a total of 3 minutes for you guys to finish this exercise. Now we finish our 3 minutes for you guys to do your part on this practice, and we have finished our lesson for the day. Now that we are at the end of our lesson, it's important for you to know that you have a lot of resources that you can use during this virtual time. Make sure that you visit HISD at home so you can see all the resources that are available for you in case that you need them. And make sure that you reach your teacher in case that you have any other questions concerning today's lesson. It was a pleasure, and I'll see you on the next lesson for Math at Home.